If it's a mistake that you made because you didn't follow directions or you didn't think through something, then that's a bad kind of mistake.
Right.
It's a mistake where you thought through, you did some research, and there was some external piece of data or influence that you couldn't have known about or would have been hard for you to know about, but you did a thoroughgoing, you made an effort.
Right.
That is a kind of mistake where you can, and then you can stand back and go, aha, I did this because of these reasons. I didn't know this, but if I had known that, then it would have turned out this way. That's the difference between, like, if you look at a resume, someone with 5 years of experience, that doesn't mean that they have 5 years. It just means that they worked for 5 years. It could be 1 year, 5 times, right? In other words, they're not growing. Or it could be in 5 years, they packed 7 years of experience in that.
Awesome, guys. Well, thank you so much for watching today. Everybody, thank you so much for your support. We have turned out about 6 or 7 of these now, and the support from the community has been absolutely amazing. So people are very interested in the foundation. They're liking, they're sharing, they're engaging so much with these, and we really, really appreciate that. For more information on the Architectural Foundation of San Francisco, we are afsf.org. You can find out all about us there. And this interview is sponsored by the Architectural Foundation of San Francisco, which is a nonprofit that provides technical training and mentorship to middle school and high school students who are considering a career in design. And our guest today is Ken Lowney, President and CEO of Lowney Architecture. Founded in 2003, Lowney Architecture is a multidisciplinary practice with teams in Oakland, California, and Honolulu, Hawaii. Considered to be one of the fastest growing practices in the East Bay, Lowney ranks among the San Francisco Business Times top firms in Northern California. Ken, thank you so much for taking the time today. Really appreciate it.
Zach, I'm happy to be here. Nice to meet you.
Awesome. You as well. You as well. If we just jump right in, can you tell our listeners just a little bit about yourself and just kind of a snippet on your background?
Yeah. I grew up in Palo Alto, just south of San Francisco. Stanford University. My father, thankfully still alive, has a civil engineering firm. I think at one point he had a partner, about 9 offices, and then they parted ways, and he ended up having just sort of the central office in Mountain View in Palo Alto. And I grew up going and working. I worked in his office for 8 summers, and that involved, doing tests, because it's a civil engineering firm. So they perform tests on the soil to analyze the structural capacities of the soil. So I was just a high school kid. But it was fun to go out into the field and take these samples and go on boring rigs, drilling rigs, go to the lab, go collect the samples. And I was taught how to do the tests. I even got a moisture density, what is it, radioactive? I don't know if they're radioactive anymore. I had to wear a counter, counting how much radioactivity I was exposed to. Take this device and go. All these. I was like 17 years old, and all this millions of dollars of equipment. I'd come out to the site and I'd go into an excavation to see how the compaction was adequate. And 17-year-old guy with 40 people watching me to see if it thumbs up or thumbs down. Thumbs down, they got to do it again, or more compaction. But it was a great learning experience.
I'll bet.
So I guess what I learned is what a professional service firm is. Architecture, engineering, even law or accounting. What you do, how you act, how you work in teams, and this was, of course, in construction. So this is, and particularly in the part of the building which you generally don't see, which is below the earth. So the foundation. And that was really eye-opening for me. And so I kind of modeled my behavior on my dad. And I thought, I don't know what I'm going to do, but this thing, I'm probably going to have my own company, because I like the idea of being the boss and setting the direction of what people would do and how we would approach problems. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is, when I got out of high school, I went to Occidental College in Los Angeles, and I studied philosophy, which has pretty much nothing to do with architecture.
I love it.
And so to get people off my back, they say, what the hell are you going to do with philosophy? I say, I'm going to be a lawyer. But I never really thought. I married a lawyer, but I didn't want to become a lawyer. And so when I graduated from Occidental with a degree in philosophy, I thought, now what am I going to do? I don't want to be a lawyer. And I sort of looked at the whole world, and I had these interests. I liked the world of ideas. And I like, what does it mean to live a good life? What is a just and fair society? These are the sort of the big philosophical questions. Mm-hmm. And what links with that? And sort of architecture just drew me because it seemed like it was addressing these same problems, but in a more direct and practical way.
Right.
And the reason I made that connection between the world of ideas and the built environment is because I was lucky enough to grow up traveling quite a bit in Europe and Central and South America. And my dad being an engineer, I went up with my dad and my siblings, and we would spend a lot of time looking at buildings. We go to art galleries, we eat stuff, and we look at buildings.
Sounds like a great trip.
So, they could be castles, they could be office buildings, they could be plazas, a church, a cathedral. But from a young age, it was like the cultural importance of the built environment and the impact of architecture, what architecture is, the role it plays in people's lives, the lives of societies and cultures. This was sort of planted in my brain. I didn't realize what was going to come of it. So when it came down for me to go out into the world or think about what I wanted to do in the world, I wasn't going to walk around in a robe and be a philosopher. But so I wanted to do something practical, and so the influence of my dad, being the first engineer, wanting to be a professional, sort of led me to architecture. I always thought that I have a great advantage, just having this bigger perspective, not just architecture, but critical thinking, the ability to write and speak,
right?
That many architects don't have. I mean, what I've learned over the years is architects have a hard time writing, and they're not very good business people.
It's funny. So many times these conversations end up going to the business side of architecture, right? Because as an owner, I mean, you can probably attest to this. That's not the stuff they teach you in school, right? Your school training is highly technical training. It is not on, how to balance a budget or, how to hire somebody.
Mostly about, your mental disposition and your ambition. But if you start a practice, there's two ways. You can either, and if you mix them up, you're going to fail. The first one is, you have to decide, are you going to be a sole practitioner or are you going to have an office with employees? And if you have an office with employees, that means you can't do everything.
Right.
If you're a sole practitioner, that means you get to do everything. You might have one or two employees, but generally that's split. And so I have 50 employees now. And so with 50 employees, there's not a lot of time that I spend using Revit.
Right.
So I think architectural thoughts. I discuss design all the time, but I'm doing something different than it's related, but different than what I thought.
Right. Right. That's such a good point to make too. And the way you just put that out, it makes so much sense to me. And I think I saw a stat one time. I mean, something like 60 to 80% of architects who own a firm at one point in their career will be a sole proprietor. Right. Doesn't mean that they stay that way for a long time. And I saw this not too long ago, but maybe 2017, 18, when the economy was booming and, there was construction everywhere. It's easy enough to kind of spill out on your own with one or two projects or, a client who's feeding you work and hang a shingle and be a sole proprietor. Right. And, maybe the economy we're entering here, I don't know if it's not bad, but as it gets a little more murky, that becomes a little harder to do, right? So you kind of have to really decide, is this the life I want as a sole proprietor, or do I aspire to be, somebody who has 50 employees and much more of a firefighter, right? Much more of
have some hustle.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's the difference. It's you're doing different things.
Right. Right. It's actually a great segue. Can you talk a little bit more about the opening of your practice and kind of that momentum and what maybe that first year or two or three looked like?
Yeah. I opened my office at 1440 Broadway in downtown Oakland in a little room that's about the size of my office here. It's probably 12 by 12. And I didn't have any work. So, but I sent out an announcement, and actually, and so I was cold calling people. I eventually got a job to do a boat and RV storage facility out by Travis Air Force Base.
Okay, Fairfield.
And it's built, but I got fired. I got fired because I didn't listen to the client.
Uh-oh.
And so then I worked really hard to get this one job, and they fired my ass, and then I had nothing, right? So there I was. I wake up and I go to my office with no work, and it was very humbling. But I still was calling people. I was introducing myself. I was relentless. I remember I went to a Chamber of Commerce meeting, and I introduced myself to someone from a big contracting firm, Panko Builders. It turned out that they were doing a Whole Foods in downtown Oakland, and they needed an architect. So they called me and said, "Hey, would you be interested?" And then we went through a whole vetting process. That was this is what happened. I cold called this guy's colleague. And so after I met this person at this Chamber of Commerce meeting, I gave him my card. He went back to the office.
Right.
Just before I called him, his colleague put my card on his desk. So when I cold called him completely randomly, he was going, "That's so strange. I have your business card in my hand right this very minute." So that was a great piece of synchronicity. So that was my first big project, and that sort of opened one direction. So I kind of have two specialties. One is sort of urban infill grocery stores, retail. And the other one is modular design.
Okay.
So multifamily modular. And then tenant improvement and industrial things like that. But those are the two big branches where I can say that we have unusual expertise.
Right. And then obviously somewhere along the line there, you made the decision to not be a sole proprietor, right? To grow.
From the very beginning, I knew I was not going to be a sole proprietor.
Gotcha.
As soon as I got that job, I hired someone who's still with me. That was almost 20 years ago.
Wow.
To take on that project.
Mm-hmm.
And so we built a team around that, and I kept looking for more work.
Yeah.
And so that one job, the tenant of that job hired me for other jobs. The contractor for that job hired me for other jobs. And I got known other competitors of this tenant, Whole Foods, wanted me to design things for them also. So I ended up doing a bunch of Safeway and other grocery stores. So just that one thing sparked a bunch of different directions.
Right. So actually hiring is a great topic because our students are, will hopefully get hired someday out of school. Is there anything in particular when you're hiring anybody for your team, but kind of focused on a younger designer? Is there anything in particular you're looking for, or that are either like red flags for you, or do you just go into the room and just like, I have a feel about this person, or you're really focused on their resume, anything like that?
Those first jobs are really a gift. For if you have never worked in an office before, it's a gift. It's an act of trust.
Right.
So you're looking for someone who's eager and open and wants to work hard and can learn from their mistakes, because you're going to make mistakes. So how are you going to manage that? And so it's really, if you have a degree, or if you're in a degree, you have a portfolio. So you'll look at the portfolio and make an appraisal of that. But it's also, your command of various programs and just your presence. You speak well. Are the lights on?
I love the mistakes. The mistakes is so important to me, because I think maybe it's my own personal belief, but I feel like I was really afraid of making mistakes early on in my career, right? When in all reality, it's not if you make mistakes, it's how many, right? And hopefully don't make the big ones. Yeah.
So if it's a mistake that you made because you didn't follow directions, or you didn't think through something, then that's a bad kind of mistake.
Right.
It's a mistake where you thought through, you did some research, and there was some external piece of data or influence that you couldn't have known about, or would have been hard for you to know about, but you did a thoroughgoing, you made an effort.
Right.
that is a kind of mistake where you can and then you can stand back and go, aha, I did this because of these reasons. I didn't know this, but if I had known that, then it would have turned out this way.
Right.
So there's no question that it's and that's the difference between, like, if you look at a resume, someone with 5 years of experience, that doesn't mean that they have 5 years. It just means that they worked for 5 years. It could be 1 year 5 times, right? In other words, they're not growing. Or it could be in 5 years they packed 7 years of experience in that.
Oh, love that.
And that's, maybe the person is ambitious. They have a mentor who's helping them, saying, look, you really got to manage yourself more effectively and communicate in a more professional manner, whatever the thing is. There's people start from the very, very beginning. It's what you make of yourself at each step. You can leverage into something more, and it's simply not a linear path.
Right. Are there any leaders in architecture, either colleagues or professors or maybe other types of figures that you admire and maybe have inspired you in some way when you're operating your firm?
So I worked at Gensler in New York City and San Francisco, primarily, a little bit in LA, a little bit in Detroit, but mostly New York for a couple of years and San Francisco for a couple of years. And so Art Gensler, this is 20 years ago, so still Gensler's a big company.
Massive.
I met him in New York. He kind of walked in. He's a tall, kind of imposing man, and he kind of barked, "Who wants to show me around the office?" And no one moved. I said, well, this is my chance, right? I realized that I was being foolish because, I didn't know there were all these projects on the wall, and I realized I didn't know about any of them. So it was a little embarrassing, but nonetheless, he and I walked around the hallways together with me fumbling. And then I transferred from New York to San Francisco and and at the time, it was still an interiors practice. They didn't do much architecture. So I was in the little architecture studio, which had only about 10 people in it. So he seemed to be very interested in all the buildings that we were doing. So he would be in the architecture studio looking at stuff and making comments. And then I've been fortunate over the past couple of years to have him as a personal friend.
Really?
So I have dinner and drinks with him and chit chat about various things. So working for him and then he becoming his friend, has been great.
So I know Art was a big supporter of the foundation. It was before my time. A gentleman named Doug Tom, TEF Design. Doug is a board member emeritus for the foundation, and I think he would know better than I would. But I know Art was involved many years ago with the foundation, and then Gensler has had a long-standing relationship. And he's another one. Art's still going, isn't he? I know he's kind of.
He is. He's getting up there. I saw him a couple of weeks ago.
Did you really? Nice.
Yeah. He's via Zoom. Yeah.
Yeah. Everything's via Zoom these days.
So blanking on the names of other people who I admire, but there are practices in the Bay Area who I admire the practice, competitors, and it's funny. I'm 55, so I'm not the grand old man, but I'm sort of the middle. And I don't feel as maybe I was in a scarcity starving mode 10 years ago, that I'm less feeling like I have to have every project. Or if someone wins, that means I lose. That's not the case.
Right.
We live in this abundant economy where there's opportunities every second created, and there's always something around the corner, right? There's always more. And so my point of view is one of abundance. There's plenty out there, and don't sweat it. Just keep working.
Right.
Be focused and serve your clients well, serve your colleagues well, and the rest will take care of itself.
So our finishing question is, it's about advice. What is the best advice that you could possibly give to an up and coming design professional? And that can be either something that you wish somebody had told you as you were going through your career, or just based on your experience now, having been an owner, something that you wish an up and coming person knew, coming out of school.
I think it's okay to study something other than architecture before you get and then get a degree in architecture. And I've spoken to younger people who are afraid of incurring debt, which is a real issue. The cost of education and how little you make it first in architecture are definite things to consider. However, I think it's worth taking the long view, and sort of the long view of your career, having multiple perspectives in your mind is a good idea. And I think similarly, it doesn't have to be another degree, it could be travel. Traveling the world, seeing how other people organize themselves and how people involve buildings in their culture is super important, because you have your blinders on to seeing the same thing.
Right.
I think travel is very important. I think finding a mentor, someone who is not connected to you, could be in your office, might be good. Could be out of your office. Could be, I would say, probably a good idea to be in the profession, with someone to give you advice on whether it's the kind of projects to work on, how to handle a difficult situation, a raise, or something felt like something didn't happen right, or you want to learn new skills. It's good to have someone who isn't your direct boss, someone who's sort of in a different relationship with you. Awesome. I think that's important. And I think it's important also to save money from the very beginning, even just a little bit.
Yeah.
Just put a little bit away and get into the practice, sort of like exercising. If you exercise regularly, you'll feel good, you'll live longer, you'll have better mental cognition. The same with saving money.
Right.
You don't have to be rich to get rich, but if you have a good savings practice, you can get rich.
Right. A lot of great advice packed into that one. Awesome. Well, Ken, that's a great place for us to leave it. Thank you again so much for your time and doing this. We really, really appreciate it. And yeah, thanks again, Ken.